think she's not ready though. So give me a second. We'll pull up. All right, let me check with her. Peace, family. Just give me a quick second, man. We're getting ready to get started. I'm waiting for one more of my brothers to pull up and one of his sons, and we're gonna get started. So let's vibe into a quick song real quick, and then we're gonna get our introduction going, and we're gonna teach this lesson.
And it has been hateful to us. We haven't wanted to identify with it. But now that Africa is getting independent and in a position to create its own image, and it's a positive image, those of us in the West look at the African image and see how positive it is. We begin to identify with it. We become proud of Africa, and we become proud of our African blood, our African heritage.
Be proud of our heritage. As somebody said earlier tonight, we don't have anything to be ashamed of. Somebody told a lie one day.
Give us the teaching of Marcus Garvey. Can run the knees. Glory of kings. Give our lives to that sky and keep the girl with the blue eyes for themselves. Cause people without a vision perish like suicide. You tell me it's not about color, still you refuse to take the picture of the wall. Oh, yeah. All you do is trick the brothers, keep them confused. They don't know who to call on in this identical war. And you tell me of what kind of guys in the sky. That's a lie. And you tell me I was born in sin and shame and iniquity when love created I. Look how many prophets tried to open our eyes. You can't fool me. No, no. Look how they're treating us. This millennium slavery, I see them hiding the chains and still beating us daily. And now we mentally rising to fight with black skin. Each and the ending, far out and far in. Sin, you tell me it's not about color, still you refuse. The images, how to pose. I know that's not how we look, Kush. Don't take offense when we show black power. It carries us through. We've been abused. Put yourself in my shoes. And not get me of a paradise in the sky. But that's a lie. Don't tell me I was born in sin and shame and iniquity, but love created I. Look how many prophets tried to open our eyes. You can't fool me. Come on, come on, come on.
Then why would you want to go there in Ethiopia?
Well, I feel it's my duty to give my profession and, if necessary, my life to the cause of Ethiopia.
And I is violently happy to die for the defense of entire Africa, including Abyssinia.
Look how they're treating us. This new millennium slavery. I see them hiding the chains and still beating us daily. And now we mentally rising to fight with black skin. And I'm bleaching at the new thing, far out and far in. You tell me it's not about color, still you refuse to take the picture of the wall. Oh, all you do is trick the brothers, keep them confused. They don't know who to call on in this spiritual war. So no tell paradise in the sky. God has a light. And you tell me I was born in civilization to the iniquity of create I and I. Look how many prophets tried to open
Somebody told a lie one day. They couched it in language. They made everything black, ugly, and evil. Look in your dictionary and see the synonyms of the word black. It's always something degrading and low and sinister. Look at the word white. It's always something pure. But I want to get the language right tonight. I want to get the language so right that everybody here will cry, yes, I'm black, I'm proud of it, I'm black and beautiful.
All right, man, we heard the songs. But we must remember, when we understand law and science, yes, black is beautiful, but black is not a nationality, Moors. And we must understand the context and the denotation and the connotation of words and understand things historically. Yes, black is beautiful, but it's not a nationality. And you have a right of your nationality. And what was so prophetic is 2010 when Obama said that you have a right of a nationality and the right to change your nationality, Moors. So we must understand the color of everything in the context of words. When we can't be afraid of words, man. We have to understand the context when words are being used. Negro beans, just denote the color of the beans, but that don't denote nationality, Moors. So we do the research and we break it down as scholars, man. So let's set a couple things in the atmosphere. We're going to get to the subject at hand today. When I talk about, a lot of Moors stay in their lower self arguing over man-made religion, and I don't deal with man-made religion, man. If you call yourself an adept and a sheik, we understand the essence of the religious rites, but we are scientists and mathematicians, man, philosophers and alchemists, and we understand what's above is below, man. We understand our body and how the earth works. So before we even jump into this, let me do my Moorish prayer, and then I set a couple things in the atmosphere, and then we're done, man. We're going to teach. But a divine prophet by Noble Drew Ali, and the prophet warns all Muslims, governors, ordered to read the proclamation at each meeting. The prophet warned all Muslim governors to read this at each meeting, January 15, 1929, Moors. And I hereby inform all members that they must end all radical agitated speeches while at work or in the streets. We are for peace and not destruction. Stop flashing your cards at Europeans. It causes confusion. Remember, your card is for your salvation. Failure to obey these orders will be of severe consequence. We are for love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And when these principles are violated, justice must then take its course. Any member who or group of members who hold malicious feelings toward the temple of the prophet or violate the divine covenant of the Moorish movement will receive their reward from Allah for their unjust deeds, Moors. All true Moors will and must obey the law as laid down to us by our prophet. And if they lose confidence in the prophet, they should turn in their card and button, cease wearing their turban and fez, and return to the state where I found you. This is a holy and divine movement founded by the prophet Noble Drew Ali. And if the prophet is not right, the temple is not right. The prophet, therefore, is sending out a divine plea to all Moorish Americans that they do their part in protecting the temple. This is an everlasting movement founded by the prophet through the will of Allah to redeem his people from their sinful ways. By order of the prophet Noble Drew Ali, Moors. That's one of the prayers that we set things from our prophet. One of our prophets, American prophet, that brought us something back to our remembrance. Brought something back to our remembrance. And if we're scholars, we have so many brothers that brought it back, but Noble Drew Ali brought the Moorish science and created the Moorish Science Temple of America. My prayer, my benediction for positivity, Moors. May I think peace, speak peace, and that I am peace. I pray that, Moors, I pray that I think truth, speak truth, and that I am truth. I pray that I think love, that I speak love, and that I am love. I pray everything I attract, I pray everything you attract, Moors, carries high, harmonious vibrations and intentions. May the light within me, may the light within you serve as a beacon for those that need it. Assalamu alaikum, shalom alaikum, ayah asha ayah, whatever name that you give praise to, man, let you do so, you know? Let you do so, man. But we got to get out of scary stuff and spookism, Morris, because it's only a few that took the time to do the research, to do all the research and touch all corners of the world, not just coming from the east. We touch all four corners, man. Don't get caught up in allegorical parables. If you're traveling from the east, you got to go to the west. That's why we travel the four corners of this earth plane, man, and we touch all four corners. But more, when we talk about wisdom and things, the 10% of the people of the world know the truth of existence. And those elites opt to keep 85% of the world in ignorance and under their controlling thumb. The remaining percentage of those who know the truth and are determined to enlighten the rest, those are the 5%, Moors. We don't get into religion. We get into science. We get into science, man. You know? So it's things, Moors, that we got to get right, man. And if we don't do things the right way, man, and do the research, we're going to always fall for spookism and somebody's arbitrary explanation of things, man. Every time. Nowhere is written of those false images of Caesar Borgia told you that was, where did we get that from? That's all symbol. And so I have brothers and sisters that's from different houses, that's from religious backgrounds, and all I do as a student and a scholar to say, look, man, let me give you something to compare to. And then you start asking questions, man, and you see why certain things was given to you. So the first topic we're going to touch on, man, and one of my brothers always asks me, is that false image of Christ and that Caesar Borgia. And I tell brothers, all you have to do is research the wisdom, man. When you talk about some counsel and what's not considered to be scriptures and to be counted as scripture, who told you that? When you research the real history of Caesar Borgia, you know, and Caesar Borgia, the second son of Pope Alexander VI, or Rome, was a Spanish Italian. And from their record, their pen, you can research the pen, they say he was a homosexual cardinal who resigned his church office to become a military commander, a powerful lord, and a leading figure in the politics of his era. You know? Caesar was a man of scientific rather than artistic interest, and he briefly employed Leonardo da Vinci as military architect and engineer. When you start looking at pictures, man, and be like, okay, well, who drew this and why? But a little known fact about Caesar Borgia is that according to the French writer Alexander Dumas, you can research this, and other writers, their pen. His likeness was used as the model for the long blonde-haired, blue-eyed, effeminate-looking Christ, which Christians, Moors, when Christians the world over have been bowing down to and worshiping for centuries. This so-called beautiful face appearance influenced many images of Jesus Christ, painted during the subsequent to his so-called career, Moors. It was during the Renaissance period, when we talk about different times, the Renaissance period, after contact was made with Africa, that the Dark Ages in Europe, they had Dark Ages, came to an end, and the paintings began to circulate portraying Mary, which is Miriam, when we talk about the whitewashing of history. And Jesus, which is Yahshua, with white skin, blue eye, and long blonde hair. And many of the later paintings of Jesus Christ were based on Caesar Borgia. Researched it, which in turn have influenced the majority of portraits of Christ created from the point onwards. And history bears witness to the millions killed, not worshiping the false created image of this white Christ. Moors. Rome and Spain dispatched the likeness of Christopher Columbus, Hernan Cortes, Hernan-Cortes, Ponce de Leon, Arniclius Vespucci, among others, with armies to kill, enslave, and also indoctrinate Negroes, Hebrews, and native indigenous people of the land to their cult of Christianity. When you research the doctrine of discovery, scholarship, I challenge everybody, research the doctrine of discovery. You don't have to argue with anyone. When Altobello Malone painting his portrait of Christ around 1520, Moors, he drew inspiration from an earlier Caesar Borgia painting, but distorted the distinction between the faces and ethnicity of the holy figure with one of the most corrupt, Moors. You can research this. 1492 goes down as the year that the entire planet was hoodwinked, per se, by the Roman Catholic Church. During Alexander's term, the Christians were fighting the Holy Crusades against the so-called infidels. So we just put things together, man. One major obstacle that faced Alexander and the church was the fact that Yeshua, who their entire religion was based on, when you research the Desert Nazarenes, was physically the same as the Islamics of color that they were fighting against, Moors. And he was represented in all paintings, carving, and sculptures as a dark-skinned man of Hebrew, Abara, A-I-Y, origin that he was. Nazarene certainly was in the Middle East area that later came under the influence of Islam, but we know it's not no such thing as Middle East. That's Southwest, all that's Africa, Kebalan. How could they possibly convince the people of the wickedness of the enemy when their own Messiah looked like them, Moors? That's why when we talk about things, when I say in masonry, man, it's the science is about you. Haram Abif, that's the Asiatic black man. Get out that allegory and goofy signs and symbols that don't mean nothing. That ain't activating your higher self. That ain't elevating the chakras. We're going to talk about something. Although the original Yahwehs, the Hebrews, were not called Christians back then, the derogatory term is Christians. You can research that, what that word means. It distinguished a hooligan, a Philistine, and you can research what creatine mean. They were certainly Hebrews and people of color, but at the time of Alexander ascended to the papacy. The Europeans had long taken control, Moors, of the church. And Pope Alexander's solution was to have every image of Yeshua destroyed and literally have the Vatican gutted and redone. Research a book called, one of my books, research Vladimir Ivanov, Russian Icona, and see how much they try to charge you for them books. But my students have them because I have access to them. And they show you in the picture how they whitewashing the history books and how they whitewashing stuff in the tombs. And when I talk about how right here in Arizona, where I'm at right now, in the Grand Canyon, they've been found the artifacts there, man. But he commissioned Leonardo da Vinci to recast Yeshua in the image of his son, Caesar Borgia, with the express intent of passing of historical Jesus, which was Yeshua as a European in appearance. In appearance, not in writing, in appearance. When I tell you how they can put some pictorial in your face and never say nothing, but that's what you would think. But you can debunk it. This day, Moors, there are armed guards stationed around the clock at the entrance at the catacombs to keep anyone from viewing the original wall carvings of Yeshua in his, legitimate ethnic Hebrew representation. I'm telling you, Moors, don't Christians realize that the image they have in churches and homes are portraits of Caesar Borgia? This is the thing that I ask my brothers when we were philosophers and thinkers. They say that Jesus was beat and on the cross and all that, and we feel bad about it, but then you don't feel bad about the picture that you can see of your brothers and sisters being beat, tortured, and hanged. Just follow the breadcrumbs. Leonardo da Vinci portraits of his lover, that's their pen, Caesar Borgia, a vile mass murderer, painted the image that everyone came to accept as Jesus Christ, remodeled to suit Europeans who were at war with Islam, who were basically the same race as Yeshua. And they was commissioned by Caesar's father, Pope Alexander. The same way the other false image of Christ, the Greek, is Serapis Christos, from Alexander the Greek. You can research this stuff, man. Man, you can research the earliest known image of Yeshua in the Coptic Museum in Cairo, Egypt. The painting of Yeshua is older than the image of the black Jesus Christ in the Church of Rome, which is from the 6th century, Moors. So we just talk about scholarship. I'm telling you. We talk about the good ship Jesus, man. We can talk, Moors, we can connect all stuff across the board. When we talk about stuff that they didn't teach you in history school. What comes to refer as the good ship Jesus was, in fact, Jesus of Lubeck, L-U-B-E-C-K, a 700-ton ship purchased by King Henry from the Hanseatic League, a merchant alliance between the Hamburg and Lubeck in Germany. We got to understand that. We got to understand Hawkins, a cousin of Sir Francis Drake, was granted permission from who? Queen Isabella. When I show you when you research the history of the reign of Ferdinand and Isabella, when you can do the scholarship and you don't have to argue, the research is done. You know? His first voyage was in 1562. He was allowed to carry Africans to America per se. with their own free consent because he tricked them with that Jesus mess. And he agreed to this condition. Hawkins had a reputation for being a religious man. The colonists bring in that book, who required his crew to serve God daily and to love one another per se. Sir Francis Drake accompanied Hawkins on this voyage and subsequent others, you know. But off the coast of Africa, near Sierra Leone, Hawkins captured around 500 so-called slave Moors, free men, mostly by, plundering the Portuguese ships through violence and things. This is the stuff that we should know. We don't get caught up in false wisdom, man. And the stuff they keep from us. When I say it's a higher level of wisdom when you activate more the Akashic records. When people be talking about things, we talk about astroplaning and connecting to your higher self and understanding what's your purpose on this earth and then making it happen. This is the wisdom that it's there, man. All the gates you can go through to activate it. When people be talking about it, but do they have the wisdom to use it? It's here, man. And we have it, you know. Old wisdom, stuff that our prophets and everybody use, and they wrap it up as something else. But I say when you're a scholar and teacher, you get the source of the information. And then as you start dissecting things, you can see where brothers took the wisdom to study, you know. You got to go through all the gates. And if a brother don't know what the Akashic records, the AKASHIC records are, research it. I have the whole library, you know. It breaks all the scrolls down, how to read the scrolls, everything, man, all the gates, you know, that we go through to activate our higher self. That's why it was only a few remaining left that with the ability to read the Akashic records accurately and with integrity, you know. And that's why when we say we have to accept the bridges and the brothers, we have messiahs and prophets now. That's why when I talk about bridges, and we don't burn bridges because we use bridges to assist us in our travels from one point to another. And when I say that work has been done from other scholars and myself that was willing to do the work and was willing to get in the belly of the beast and challenge pseudo-academia. But I'm a bridge. You're a bridge. The wisdom is a bridge to help us realize why we are currently here and why there's so few souls who have volunteered to read the Akashic records. You know? I mean, it's real wisdom, man. The value of being able to correctly read your own records is similar to research from a good encyclopedia, Moors. When you go into reference manual, because you have a question on a very specific area of thought. Perhaps it's a person or where you should be in life. But that's why when you do things, you don't include the mythology on how to read the Akasha and Gematria. You know, the reason is simple, Moors, is the basic information on the Akashic records as presented in the text. That when you research the wisdom and apply it, Moors, it's discussed and understood prior to the knowledge of assessing, Moors. When you plan a trip, per se, and I'm using an analogy, when you never the past, it is also wise to either take a guide with you or to get a map to plan your trip. All right? So questions such as, what should I avoid? What should I definitely plan to see? How many miles will I travel? How many hours a day will it take for the trip? These and other questions must be addressed prior to any successful trip, Moors. It is also identical with accessing the Akashic records in the Akashic library. You must initially gather as much accurate information more as possible before you contemplate petitioning to admit to the library and to read it, family. We got to understand that. The work has been done. We must use the tools. I'll give you a little history in the first gate. We all are seekers of truth, Moors. We all want to know what happens to the soul when it dies. Our search these great libraries, this great philosophy. The word Akasha is extremely ancient, predating all of Earth's languages, Moors, past and present. Past and present. When I say this is just a higher level of wisdom, and that's okay. We should be students. Some people are just apprentices. That's no wisdom. A fellow craftsman, that's no wisdom. That's all allegorical symbology. While words that are similar sounding may be found in other languages, Moors, Akasha is literally a language unto itself. The word is pronounced Akasha. Akasha. When I spoke to other adepts and things as I traveled through the East and the West, and I talked to a lot of my elders and a lot of the people that are my auspices that I'm under at Oxford and Cambridge, and they released the language. But the keeper of all the Akashic libraries of the world, of this solar system, Moors, where this word originated. And it directs you right to biblical scriptures. When you take everything and dissect it, when you prove things, we don't tear nothing down. Genesis 1, 2, and 3. Reread that, the G-O-D. The G-O-D they like to say. And we use it in their phrase, but we know what it is. Created heaven and earth. That spirit moved upon the face of the waters. And that spirit said, let there be light. And when you read that and when you understand certain things, the understanding of these verses made acutely aware that every atomic particle has movement. Every atomic particle has movement, Moors. Therefore, as everything that the Creator has created is made up of what? Atomic particles. The 666. 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons. Carbon, dark matter. From darkness comes to light. Movement is a specific definition of all life as well as time stream, Moors. The Creator moved upon the face of waters. All feminine life was born, as the element of water has always been associated with what? The feminine. Polarity. Indeed, Moors, many ancient cultures believe that believe that out of the primal, out of that waters, the elements of earth was created along with fire, air, producing all life. So we understand how to read the Akashic records, Moors. This is what we do, man. We activate and we win. And so one of my brothers, man, he studied, and I love my brothers and sisters, and he say that he's a Hebrew Israelite, and that's great. I love my brothers and sisters. I here to build bridges and walls. One nationality cultures. We have a flag. We don't strip nobody from their culture. If you are more, you understand that we're from the tribe of David, lineage of Judah. We connecting all the dots, man. I can show you, I'm going to show you some history of the slave when I showed you Aluda Equino, the history of this slave from London. And then you can research the history when I show you history that was already done genetically and things about the Igbo and the Hebrew, who they really are in Nigeria. You can research the history. The Igbo and the Hebrew of Nigeria are the true Jews. But in 1789, Aluda Equino, an Igbo and former slave who lived in London, said in his autobiography that the Igbos and the Ebos were one of the lost tribes of Israel, and cited that many identical cultures, similarities between them and the Jews. When the missionaries came to Nigeria to evangelize, they were dumbfounded to discover that the Igbo people practiced many Hebraic Jewish customs, which could not have been learned from anyone else. It had to come from the ancient practice of their people from antiquity. For they had no Bibles and met no one with the Bible until when? Missionaries came along. They would already eat animals that met biblical clean requirements, as well as the complete draining of blood from the animal, as well as the other laws concerning kashrut, which is kosher animals. Concept of clean and unclean, we already had that. So we can destroy that false wisdom. Just like we can debunk when people say Arab, and I say it's nothing. Arab is no nationality genetically. If you speak that language, you are Arab. You can research the book called The Arabs, by the life story of a people who left their deep imprint on the world, by Bertram Thomas. And this book was published back in 1937. This is a European. He stayed with him for 14 years. You don't got to listen to me. You can research it for yourself. The History of the American Indians by James Adair, when he clearly says it, that close to half of this book is dedicated to the notion that the Native American tribes are the descendants from the lost tribes of Israel. You know, many scholars postulate that the Book of Mormon was partially inspired by Adar's history. I can show you that the Book of the Mormon was plagiarized, was taken from the view of the Hebrews. All that Book of the Mormon came from the view of the Hebrews. I got it in, I think I got one right here. When I tell you, man, no wisdom comes from the West. All that wisdom comes from right here. You can trace things if you are a scholar, you know, and a philosopher. But the rest of their work, however, contains insight that can never be rediscovered or elaborated upon. The wars and gradual conquest of the Native American tribes by white settlers left precious little of their culture available for scrutiny by subsequent generations of historians. As such, this book remains one of the most valuable and cited primary sources on the subject. Come on, family. And we sit up here arguing over some man-made religion, over some stuff. I said, man, you the question, the answer, the solution. You arguing over stuff that has nothing. And in this book's on science and history that show you how to operate in your higher self, that show you how to operate all your chakras, that show you the Akashic records. We're arguing over some bull crap, and we don't understand economics. We scared of words. We're not understanding the etymology and the language of the words that we're being used in language. Like, for instance, Negro, black, and colors, and some so-called Moors that's woke. When they get scared of words occult, everything is an occult. But what they did with programming, they showed you on things in TV that occult, some black magic and some scary. And I challenge my brothers to look up the word occult. And don't stop at one phrase. Read it all. Occult, Latin, to hide, conceal, secrete, cover up. Apocryphal, Greek, hide away, Latin, hide away. Esoteric, Greek, the ES. Eso, within, exoteric, understood by the general public. Theosophy, any of a number of philosophies, maintaining that a knowledge of a higher self may be achieved through spiritual ecstasy, direct intuition, or special individual relationship. Gnosis, knowledge of spiritual mystery. You get quoted, you get commentated from Helena Blavatsky with that secret, with her book called The Secret Wisdom, The Secret Doctrine. All that stuff comes from Moors, man. You can research it, they'll tell you. Latin, occultere, secret, conceal, based on seclare, to hide, an adjective, and noun, from occult, cover up, from verb, accord. Knowledge of spiritual mystery, gnosis, noun, origin Greek. Gnosis, knowledge. Gnosikin equals know. I mean, there's so much we should know, man. There's so much we should know. That good ship, Jesus, we're going to touch on some things that they didn't teach you in high school. Moors were not modern Arabs. We say modern Arab because being Arab does not mean that one was not a Moors. The confusion comes in because Arab is a language group as well as a national identity in modern times. Modern times. Just like when brothers say they speak Hebrew, they say modern Hebrew. I said that's gibberish. You know, but you know, it is what it is. But that's all it is. Arab is the generic sense. You know, is anyone who speaks the language of Arabic. That's why a prophet comes in the voice of the people. Yes, you can learn all the different languages, but there's no excuse if your prophet comes in your voice and you know his name. Moors are what would be considered to be so-called African. I'm telling you, man. And it's government documents to prove all this. However, the definition has changed over time, which also lends to what? Misnomers. Like when I talk to my misnomer Latino and Spanish brothers and Mexican brothers. That's a misnomer. Ain't no such thing as no Mexican or Latino genetically. Research it. North African, Berber, late 14th century, from Old French, M-O-R-E, from medieval Latin, M-O-R-U-S, from Latin, M-A-U-R-U-S, inhabitant of Mauritania, Northwest Africa, a region now corresponding to North Algeria and Morocco. From Greek, M-A-U-R-O-S, perhaps a native name, or else cognate with M-A-U-R-O-S. Black, but this adjective only appears in late Greek and may as well be from the people's name as the reverse Moors. So being a dark people in a relation to Europeans Moors, Their name in the Middle Ages was a synonym for Negro. That's like when you see the beans, Negro beans is denoting the beans. Later, around 16th century, 17th century, used indiscriminately of Muslims, Persians, Arab, etc., but especially those in India. You can research this, man. You can research the Moorish dance in circa 1480 in the Carnival of Ringling. Don't y'all know what that stuff come from? Research this stuff. When I talk about Black Pete and Swarty Piet, that's all Moors, but they ain't gonna tell you. The carnival tradition in Ringling goes back centuries, Moors. The earliest mention of the carnival in Ringling already comes from the end of the Middle Ages. Ringling is the city of Moor launderers, as Ringling once performed in a circus, was among other things a so-called black man, Moors, a Moor, right? With the troops, the inhabitants of the city, which had previously never seen a black man, Moors, felt that this was an act of a white man who had not washed. Research the history of Black Pete, a Swarty Piet in the Netherlands. I'm telling you, this is all across the board. They know who you are. It was no use. He was black. Since then, the hot Ringling, the MOHR scrubber, and as a symbol for the figure, more was created, Moors. The whitewashing ritual. I mean, they got pictures. Research this, the whitewashing ritual. Let's touch on this. After the gold, G-O-L-E, has moved into the city, followed on Wednesday evening in the town square, the whitewash, already in the 50s, the custom of one Ringlinger, MOHR, scrubber, was celebrated with joy, but then adjusted again over the years, Moors. At the newly established group of Traveler Moore and his Washingburn, the whitewash was then brought back from a deep sleep in the 750th anniversary of the city in 2005. Research it. A well-known personality who has rendered outstanding services to the Ringling, but is not born in the city, is pre-selected in secret and presented as a big surprise to the assembled foolish citizenship that evening, Moors. First times in a humorous manner, circumscribed, Moors, before it is then brought to the stage and washed in a washtub for real, Ringling and Moor. Research it. Moabite, ancient Moors language, is Kemetic. What they call Semitic is Moabite, also known as Phoenician. In these cases, it clearly Kemetic. That's why when we talk about things in the biblical scriptures, when you see the European perspective in that Novus Testamentum, they tell you that a Morite and a Maronite can't enter the kingdom of God. Well, that's you. That's Ruth. That's all that. That's the Moabites, man. So how did it jump from Kemetic to so-called Semitic? For my brothers that say they read Temet to Nether, they read signs and symbols. I mean, it's just simple work. It's nothing to argue about. More in due form, positioned at Atlantis. When those anthropologists saw underwater images of the city, underwater, and then people say, how did all that water disappear? Nobody doing scholarship. I keep telling you, the Grand Canyon right here, you got ancient artifacts right here. I'm telling you. Research it. What they saw underwater, image of this city, and saw some stone monuments, some symbols and inscriptions. They identified with the omic motives. I showed you in one of my pictures, in one of my books that they couldn't erase. That's an old book, all the omics heads, everything they've been filed thousands of years ago. But they put it in their libraries, in the museums in Europe and Spain and stuff. And they know both black people and Negro, black and colored, and even a lot of Moors. They're not gonna get the facts. They're gonna argue over bull crap. What somebody tell them. I have nothing to compare it to. But they were surprised. The omics devolved from the survivors of Atlantis, a much superior culture, destroyed after the end of the Ice Age flooding. The world was reshaped and a super civilization destroyed. We remember that, man. The world was reshaped and a superior civilization destroyed. Remember from millennia in legend and a passing reference by the philosopher so-called Plato. But we know where that comes from. Atlantis was real, Moors. I can show you America. Get the book America BC. I forget the name of the author. I have it. I'll break it down. It tells you all that, man. It show you a lot of maps, old maps. Scientists Paul Wingswig and Pauline Zalitsky have found it. Sonar images of megastructures on the seabed. Moabites, Phoenicians in Europe. When you find the things that they found underwater, these are things that they found underwater, man. Ain't no aliens made these things, man. That's why if you're a real Morris Mason and you understand the story of Haram Abif, we were the ones that were commissioned to do the work. Or Morocco is the name given in ancient times to the part of Gaul between the Seine and the Loire rivers. That includes the Brittany Peninsula, extending inland to an intermediate point and down the Atlantic coast moors. The base area on the Gaulish phrase Armorion, at what moors? The sea. Made into the Gaulish place named Armorica or Armorica, placed by the sea moors. The suffix ika was first used to create adjectival forms and then names. Regions such as Pays d'Auxi from Utica and Perche from Pertica. The original designation was vague, including a large part of what became Normandy in the 10th century, Moors. Man, I can go on and on. In Britain, which belongs to the Brittonic branch of the insular Celtic language, along with the Welsh and the Cornish, Moors. On the sea. On the sea. Oh, man. After the blood of Noah, Misnor, or Mizraim, the son of Ham, and according to the line of Seth, as corrected by Bishop Cuberlin, Tought appears next, the son of Mizraim. He is therefore the grandson of Ham, the son of Noah. Hermes Britannicus, a dissertation on the Celtic deity. You can research that by Tautius, by W.L. Bowles. So if we're going to break things down more, when I talk about we don't destroy nothing, we build bridges. When I say the reason why we just been taught wrong, I can show you that the biblical scriptures and historical, that the Asiatic black man per se is the father of civilization. When people say the blood of Jesus, which is Yahshua, it takes the blood of Jesus to be saved, right? Per se, our Negro blacks and colored love Jesus so much. The so-called blacks were born saved. Jesus was of Moabite and Canaanite blood, so it's in your DNA. In case you didn't know, Moors, Canaan was one of Ham's sons. Ham in the Bible is supposed to be the father of the so-called blacks, right? Not to mention that Ruth was a Moabitess. What is the line and genealogy from which Jesus came? Abraham, Boaz by Ruth, Jesse, King David, Solomon, Hezekiah, and Joseph. Spiritual father by Mary. So what is the need? I have to be honest, for a European or a white Jesus, you know? Slaves can't get reparations, you know? When we talk about in law, damages are awarded, typically of money, to be paid to a person as compensation for loss of injury. The rule for damages can and frequently do vary based on the type of claim which is presented, like breach of contract versus a tort claim and the jurisdiction family. At law, Moors, damages are categorized in compensatory or actual damages that compensate you, and punitive damages. Compensation damages are further categorized in special damages, which are economic losses such as loss of earnings, property, damage, and medical expenses, and general damages, Moors, which are non-economic damages such as pain and suffering and emotional distress, Moors. That's why our American prophet, Noble Drew Ali, says that they are going to have to pay us for all the work our forefathers, our foreparents did, and with compound interest. That's why slaves can't get reparations, but they can sure get compensation. So when we talk about the slave ship Jesus and all that, we talk about the Demi Moore, and we talk about John Hawkins. I hope we know that history. Captain John Hawkins captured so many Moors. He was given the ship Jesus by Queen Isabella and a Demi Moore banner as a testimony of his enslaving of Moors. You don't gotta listen to me. This is a thing that's in history. You can research it all. And we sitting around arguing over some dumb stuff, and we're not operating on this earth plane. The whole thing, man, don't you know a lot of commissions, man, things and documents in history were signed to keep you from not knowing who you are? That was the major thing, man. It was a film in the 90s version, the classic Robin Hood, the story with Kevin Costner, Morgan Freeman, who plays a philosophizing Moor, Robin Hood, Moorish companion, Azim. Back in the day, Harry Belafonte, is that his name? He played a Moor, not Harry Belafonte. I have to find it. I forget the man's name. He was looking for this type of jewel, but I was watching it last night. I forget what's his name? Sidney Poitier. Research, he played a Moor. Old movie. But in 2001, more I remember, Martin plays Jamal, an employee in the medieval world amusement park. And after a blow to his head, he awakens to find himself a Moor in 14th century England. And few documents portray the ethnicity of the Moors in medieval Europe with more passion, boldness, and clarity than Moorian. Moorian is a metrical romance rendered into English prose from the medieval Dutch version of the Lancelot. Moorian is an adventure of the splendidly hero with the Moorish knight, supposed to have lived in those days of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, golden age of the Moors. Moors, you can research that, page 65. Lawrence Fishburne played the title role of Othello. You can reach that Shakespeare wrote about Othello the Moor, the so-called African-American actor, after Paul Robeson to perform the role. The movie was based on the tragedy of Othello the Moor of Venice by William Shakespeare, written around 1603, and based on the Italian short story on Capitano Moro, a Moorish captain. Yes, black is beautiful, Moors, but black is not a nationality. We just have to understand language and words. We say, yes, I love black, I love all colors, but according to science, which our Noble Ali said, and what is science? According to Noble Ali and according to science of law, when we talk about black, yes, it's beautiful. And I'm quite familiar with Elijah Poole Bay's lessons, which is the origin of the scientific breakdown of blackness. That's why I say a Shriner, a European matron that's crossed the shrine to have the fez, they practice Al-Islam. They have the supreme lessons of the land mass and what the Asiatic black man is. They know this. That's why they dress in the attire and they praise you in secrecy. But that does not transmute into law, what I'm saying, Moors. At law and in reference to nationality, Moor, it means a dead nation with no land or flag tied to it. Black is a slave caste label like white is. And you know what the white caste represents, Moors. I hope you just know science, but if you really want something to think about, a Moor with his nationality is considered a part of the white caste at law because he is a whole and not 3/5. Research it. That's why they said, research why you couldn't be a complete man. Interestingly, more enough, the word black as a verb had its origin in black, adjective, Old English, bleak, dark, from Proto-Germanic, black eyes, burned. Morris, I'm gonna give you a little something to think about. When you were in public school and they told you and they put a person in the same category as place and thing, as an adjective, as ownership, how can a person be in the same category as place and thing if they're not putting you in the same category as something that can be owned for life, as chattel? You are now, that's why I tell you, it's certain things that it's elementary. To burn, gleam, shine, flash, bleach, Old English, bleaken, bleak, white from Proto-Germanic, black Jan, to make white, cognates, Old Saxon, bleak, Old Norse, bleaker, Dutch, bleak, Old High German, bleak, German, bleak, pale. I mean, we can go on, man, if you understand what I'm saying. Black referring to people did not exist before the 1600s, is what I'm telling you. Prior to the Civil War and all that, American Revolution and all that, before 1825, see what they called you. Prior to that, blacks were known as Moors, black Moors, and then misnomered black. I'm telling you, man. Black as a noun. Old English, B-L-A-E-C, the color of black. Also ink, from noun use of black as an adjective from late 14th century as dark spot in the pupil of an eye. The meaning, black person. Africa is from 1620s, perhaps late 13th century, and blackamoor is from 1540s. That's why when you get the 1599 Geneva Bible, it don't say nothing about African Ethiopian. It talks about more. You know? Morisco means Moors. The wars went on, and one by one, the Moor strongholds fell until only Granada. If you understand the war of Ferdinand and Isabella remained in their hands. Malaga was taken in 1487 after a long siege by the forces of Ferdinand and Isabella, and in 1492, Granada was recovered. Many of the Moors remained in Spain. Those who remained faithful to Islam were called Mujiris, while those who accepted Christianity were called Moriscos. Research it. You can research the science, man. Thanksgiving celebrations, the fall and subjugation of Moors is just what it is. On November 25th, 1491, after a long bloody fight against the Moors, the Asiatic Muslims who occupied Spain over 400 years, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain fell upon their knees and gave thanks to Santiago for the victory of the Moors. On this same day, the Pope of Rome proclaimed that day to be forever a day of thanksgiving for all European Christians. There you have the history. Why? Because the so-called blacks of Granada, called Moors, who were originally from Africa, Spain, and Arabia, surrendered the city of Granada, the last stronghold of the Moors in Spain, and the walls of the Moorish Empire came to Moors. These Sidane Moors were driven into Morocco and further down in the West Africa, and were later betrayed, captured, and sold into America as slaves, Moors. Hunting down the stern, deep olive, Kharajite Moor from Baghdad, Turkey, and slaying or enslaving him was an act highly regarded by the Christian European forces who despised these Moors, mocking them, called Turkeys. Abraham Kalalua, thanksgiving for whom? So when we talk about the Moorish head, it seems taking the Moorish head was a symbol of triumph and later status in Spain, while in much of European, the heraldry denotes proud lineage. However, this is not always the case. When we talk about things of duality, we talk about the Moorish head and the Moorish flag and certain things. We have to know where that person coming from. Are you mocking it or are you celebrating it? I'm going to give you a definition of the Moorish head. A representation of a human head with feathers, characteristic of formerly supposed to be characteristics of a Moor. A heraldic representation of a head, usually with the feathers and colors of a black person, depicted in profile with a band about the forehead, unless a different position or a different headdress is specified. I'm telling you, man, we wear our headdresses. When I tell Negro, black, and colors, and even some Moors that's not initiated, I say, Moors, look in the biblical scriptures. It talks about our turban with our jewel on it. It talks about our bonnets right in there. It shows you what we wore. All the different variations of Moor on the coats of arms of Pope Benedict. You know, colon forever, name variations, M-O-O-R-E, M-O-R-E, M-O-H-R, M-O-O-R. We have to show things, man, for we can know in history, for we can find these things. It's right in history. Moors ruled for 800 years, we know that. But did you know the Moorish dance of Europe and the Morisca dance of the Americas is of Moorish origin? When I trace everything, man, mid-15th centuries, Moori dance, Moorish dance, from Flemish Moorisk, M-O-O-R-I-S-K-E, dans, D-A-N-S, from Old French, M-O-R-O-I-S, Moorish, Arab, black, from M-O-R-E, M-O-O-R. Unknown why the English dance was called this, unless it in reference to a fantastic dancing or customs. And you could compare Italian Morisco, a related dance, literally Moorish, German Moorish cantons, French Morisque. You can research this. Where is Maurice? Reference to Saint Maurice, the Moor. The Europeans say as they dance, the Moorish dance is originally the Moorish dance. all through Europe, through the middle so-called East, India, and parts of Central and South America. You can find that, man. They call it the Native American dance, Mexican and Mesoamerica, you know, or the sword dance. Many European sword dances were taken over by the trade guilds. Research that. I'm going to show you the small statue of a Moorish Tanzer made by Eramus Grasser, E-R-A-S-M-U-S Grasser in 1480. Old Town Hall in Munich, one of a set of 16, of which only 10 remain. This dancer is clearly Moorish, but all the other 9 surviving carvings have a Caucasian features, all wearing bells on their legs. I'm telling you. I just told you about the swarty piet or swarty Pete or Black Pete. Research this. Black P-I-E-T, the legend of swarty piet, also occasionally refers to him as a Moor, a term that was more than scientific and referred to one of the many different groups originating in North Africa Moors that at one time controlled Spain. You know, the Moors vary while the depiction of piet stays fairly consistent. Dark skin, curly hair, red lips. Research it. In Jan Schenkman's book, S-C-H-E-N-K-M-A-N-S, Jan Schenkman's, the Nicholas in Zinc, Nicholas and the Servant, has been created with establishing and bringing uniformity to the Dutch Sinterklaas. When you look at that Sinterklaas position, look like the Roman Catholic Pope. The book reflecting then familiar elements such as the riding a horse, giving gift through the chimneys, and coming from Spain. It introduced bringing Sinterklaas on a steamer, and perhaps the most significantly accompanied by one black-skinned servant, commonly interpreted to be a Moor. This servant did not have a name. I mean, research it. P. Van Gloper illustration. This is in 1907. Of swarty piet. This is in 1907. Come on, man. Come on, man. He ain't get that dark coming down the chimney. If he got dark going down the chimney, why the so-called Saint Nick ain't get dark coming down the chimney? Come on, man. And if we so caught up, and more, this is the thing, we just use logic. They blackface everything else, but they ain't gonna blackface the so-called Jesus. So it's a lot of things that we just think about, man. And we get that dogma out of, and we operate on this earth. You know, research the Tarifa, the T-A-R-I-F-A, and the first human traces in Tarifa date back to the Paleolithic times. Research that stuff, man. Remember Obama jokes about being a Moorish American? When he admitted I was born in Morocco? This is at a press release, Washington, D.C., in a press conference this morning. You can research it, the date, 12/7/2010. President Obama admitted that he was, in fact, born in Morocco. It's halfway between Kenya and the U.S. Mr. Obama explained, so in the spirit of bipartisan compromise, I'm going to admit that I was born in Morocco. I haven't seen the long-form birth certificate either, and I don't remember my birth, so who knows? There's probably some truth in both sides. I hope by extending this olive branch to my opponents that we can lay this matter to rest. Huffington Post, research that. That's why he said in 2010, you have a right of the nationality that was so prophetic is you have a right to change it. Research the laws of indigenous people. Research the laws of a child. You talk about stuff that's already there, but you must activate it. Etymology of Negro, black, color, Moros, and Moor. Color is an adjective. Late 14th century, past participle. It's an adjective. It's from color Moors in reference to non-white skin. You know? Particular is an adjective. Negro is a noun. A member of a black-skinned race of Africa around 1550s. From Spanish or Portuguese, Negro black, like I say, Negro beans. From Latin, nigrum, N-I-G-R-U-M. Nominative, nigger, dark, sable, dusky, figuratively, gloomy, unlucky, bad, wicked, unknown origins, perhaps from pie. You see how they try to denote things we talk about color as evil? As an adjective from 1590s, used with a capital N, became generally early 20th century. 1930, a New York Times style book in reference to U.S. citizens of African descent Moors. But because of its association with the white imposed attitudes and roles, the word was ousted in the late 1960s. In the sense by black. Black, old noun. I gave you all that. Blackamoor is from 1540s. Black amour, dark-skinned person, 1540s or more. Kemet, Moabite, later entering the Greek language and passed along to Europe in the 14th century. From Old French, M-O-R-E. From medieval Latin, M-O-R-U-S. From Latin, M-A-U-R-U-S. Inhabitant of Mauritania, Northwest Africa, a region now corresponding to northern Algeria and Morocco. From Greek, M-A-U-R-O-S, perhaps a native name, or else Moors. Cognate with moros, black, but this adjective only appears in late Greek and may as well be from the people's name, family. The definition of cognate, of the same or similar nature, genetically alike, related by blood, also related on the mother's side, related by descent from the same ancestral language. You see what I'm saying? Be of a word or morpheme, related by derivation, borrowing or descent, or C, of a substantive, related to a verb, usually by derivation, how it's put together, and surviving as its object to reinforce the meaning. We can look up all this stuff, man. Declaration of land rights, reclaiming of sacred Moorish lands in Jerusalem. Don't we know, if we talk about scholarship, Moors were part and parcel to the holy territories, which were Jerusalem and Palestine. Whereas Moors initially made Jerusalem their domicile because they preferred Jerusalem as a center for divine education, as well as a holy territory. Whereas November the 2nd, 1320 CE, a Moor scholar named Abu Madin Suin bin al-Mujid, Abu Abala Moab bin al-Sheikh al-Amin, aka the Magnet of Morocco, identified two Moorish territories in Jerusalem, Moors, whereas according to the 15th century historian Mujira ad-Din, the quarter was established in 1193 by Saladin's son al-Malik al-Fajj as a WAQF, a charitable trust dedicated to Moors. He also established a school there, Afdiyah, if I'm pronouncing it right, A-F-D-A-L-I-Y-Y-A-H. You see the Y, you see the Yah in there? I ain't gonna go over the Yoso Somos code today. I'm gonna do that tomorrow because we don't have time. And when I talk about a palindrome word, Yah to the right and Yah to the left. But the first location was the village called In-Karim, E-I-N-K-A-R-E-M. In-Karim consisted of plains, rough terrain, houses, all that stuff, man. We can cross all those avenues. That's why civil rights began to fade. Through the Voters' Right Act has been renewed until 2031. It seems that this apparent victory went quite undershadowed by the Supreme Court's decision to eliminate the most important part of the act. Remember, in 2006, Moors, the reauthorization renewed several key protections providing for language assistance. You know, election, day monitors, and justice. We're talking deep science, Moors. The pre-approval voting changes, you know. All these things that has to do with stripping you from your identity, and we don't know because we don't really know history. You know, the coverage formulated about Alabama versus the Holder Attorney General. You know, as a result of the Supreme Court ruling, some states have begun to enact laws that work to the disadvantage of the so-called blacks and minorities. Remember in Texas, remember that? When the federal court rejected Texas voter ID law, calling it the most stringent in the country? Or the Wisconsin voter ID law, the American Civil Union filed a federal lawsuit charging that Wisconsin voter ID law is unconstitutional. Ohio's cut to early voting. North Carolina's voter suppression law. You know what I mean? Islam. Man, I'm always, and I'm getting ready to come back. We should link up, man. That's what I'm saying. I'm from Flint, Michigan. Let's link up. You know? We're supposed to teach this historically, not just on some religious dogma, man. The unconstitutional act, section 4 and 5, were intended to be temporary. You know? The citizenship clause. You know, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. This clause literally puts blacks under the jurisdiction of the United States Corporation and deeming it citizenship, while at the same time equating rights with privileges and immunities. When I say you fighting over civil rights instead of human rights, That's crazy. That's crazy. You know? This is why the Voters' Rights Act was needed, to enforce the de facto form of the citizenship rights. This is clear in the discerning remarks of Justice Ginsburg, who, with whom Justice Breyer, Justice Sotomayor, and Justice Kagan. Man, we got to know this. A century after the 14th and 15th Amendments, Morris, guarantees citizens' rights to vote free of discrimination on the basis of race. The blight of racial discrimination in voting continue. You know? We can touch on everything, Morris. You got to keep in mind that all true citizens are already guaranteed the right to vote. So-called blacks are not considered citizens because Negro, Black, and Colored African Americans are a caste label denoting the slaves, not nationalities. So when I tell Morris and they come up with ID cards, and I say that's great, but when you nationalize the right way through the Moorish Science Temple of America, which is your birthright, you get your amnesty of oath, you get your adoption papers, you get your dispensation papers, you get a lot of things, not just some cards. When brothers don't understand how the temple was set up, when they bashing 501c3, and I say them are not Moors, but they're not Moorish Science Temple of America. And then we talk about the Moors, it's COINTELPRO. And I say, man, we really need to know what COINTELPRO is. Ron Karenga, the so-called the black man that created that fake Kwanzaa, and all these other brothers that did things to destroy movements. You know, that's real COINTELPRO, not the brother that's maybe giving some information and they think is valid and they didn't do the research. We don't destroy our brothers. We correct our brothers from love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, and my 2 cents, health, and wealth. Because there's only a few scholars that can correct history. We don't get caught up in feelings in a person. If your brother is not correct, we should sit down with that brother and show the brother the wisdom. And then if he don't accept it, then he's operating his lower self. Because when man honors man, he honors Allah. And when man disrespects man, he disrespects Allah. We're supposed to be operating on love. If we understand all our Quran, and if we read all our laws, come on, man. That's why that Dred Scott law. That's why our nationality papers and all that stuff, it means things. The Supreme Court on March 6, 1857, ruled 7-2, that a slave, Dred Scott, who had resided in a free state and territory where slavery was prohibited, was not thereby entitled to his freedom. That African Americans were not and could not never be citizens of the United States. You can research that in Encyclopedia Britannica. That's why when Abraham Lincoln, before he was a president, he defended the Moore in court. Because our brother was like, no, if they say I'm a Negro, Black, and Colored, I can't own anything. So the Voters' Rights Act was put in place temporarily to enforce the pseudo-citizenship on the black slave caste bestowed by the 14th and the 15th Amendments, Moors. However, just as the Supreme Court's justice now deemed the 4th and 5th sections of the Voting Rights Act unconstitutional, Moors, so do many states, the 14th and the 15th Amendments themselves unconstitutional, Moors. This is why as soon as the Supreme Court struck the pre-clearance, they immediately went to work by initiating restrictive voting laws. Man, don't y'all, that's why it's a lot of wisdom, like the revised, the law of freedom and bondage in the United States. There's so much wisdom, man. This is the only beginning, and the so-called blacks had better start to wrap their minds around the concept of nationality and citizenship so that they may participate as all other nationalities in constitutional government and free men and free women, and not as a second-class temporary status. That's why in certain things, when you see in antiquity, they were free men. That's why Obama said you have a right of a nationality and a right to change it. That's why he said, I'm giving you an olive branch. I'm giving you something to think about. That's why this peace in the Middle East rests with the Moors, per se. According to our American prophet, Noble Drew Ali, the people of Africa, known as Amexima, in ancient times are the descendants of the biblical Ham, and his son Cush. The inhabitants of Africa are the descendants of the ancient Canaanites from the land of Canaan. Old man Cush and his family are the inhabitants of Africa who came from the land of Canaan. His father Ham and his family were second. The descendants of Ham are known as Hamites or Kemites. Likewise, Moors. The descendants of Cush are known as Cushite family. Therefore, Hamites and Cushites are the same people, only their installation Moors in Africa comes at different points in history. These are the Moabites, the Hamites, the Canaanites, who were driven out of the land of Canaan by Joshua, Jesus per se. Not Yahshua, and received permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to settle in that portion of Egypt. In later years, they formed themselves kingdoms. These kingdoms are called, to this day, Morocco, Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, etc., family. So the inhabitants of the kingdoms are known as Moors, descendants of the ancient Moors, known in ancient times as Temeru, and their land, the land of Mura, an ancient Kemetic word from whence Moors and its many variants are derived, family. Tamaru, people of the land of the Nile flood, Egyptians. Moors have a historical and modern connection with the land known as Israel. Today, this is seldom spoken or written about Moors. One such historical connection comes in the form of an ancient Kemetic stele. Moors, when I show you the slave ship that comes from Judah, when I show you that the YHWH is right on the hieroglyphs, when I show you that it was two Hebrew pharaohs, Sibakos and Sabatos, in Egypt. I mean, you don't got to listen to me. You can research the wisdom. The stuff be right in our face. We arguing over some dogmatic. Shechem or Shechem. In Hebrew, the standard, a Tiberian, is the shoulder, was a Canaanite city mentioned in the Amarian letters and as mentioned in the Hebrew Bible as an Israelite city of the tribe of Manasseh and the first capital of the kingdom of Israel, traditionally associated with Nablus. It is now identified with the site of Tel Balata in Balata al-Balad in the West Bank. Shechem had been a Canaanite settlement, first mentioned in the Egyptian text on the Setku stele, an Egyptian stele of a noble at the court of Sennacherib III, circa 1880 and 1840 BC, in the Amarna letters of about 1350 BC. The Amarna letters were a communication between the Canaanites and the Amori, which was an Amorite kingdom between the modern West and the northwestern Syria and Lebanon between the 14th to 12th centuries. Amori was part of the Kemetic Empire. That's why I say some more of it is stuck in a part of history, and that's okay. We got to connect all the dots and cross all the four corners of the world. The connected. Moors are the original Jews as well. I just gave them to you, the Igbo and Igbo people. There are several subgroups of Jews with different cultures and traditions. When you talk about the Ashkenazi, the descendants of Jews from France, Germany, and Eastern Europe. The Sephardic, descendants of Jews from Spain, Portugal, North Africa, and the Middle East. And the Mizrahic, the descendants of Jews from North Africa and the Middle East. Other subgroups are Yemenite, Ethiopian, and Oriental. I hope we know this. Ashkenazic and Sephardic Jews represent two distinct subcultures of Judaism. We all are Jews and share the same basic belief, but there are some variations in culture practices. It's not clear when the split began, Moors, but it has existed for more than 1,000 years because around the year of 1000 CE, you know? So who is the Ashkenazic Jew? Ashkenazic Jews are the Jews of France, Germany, and Eastern Europe and their descendants. The adjective Moors, Ashkenazic, its corresponding nouns, Ashkenazi, singular, Ashkenazim, plural, are derived from the Hebrew word, which is still American word Ashkenaz, which is used to refer to German or Germany. I'm telling you, most American Jews today are Ashkenazim, descended from Jews who emigrated from Germany and Eastern Europe from the mid-18th to the early 90s. Who are the Sephardic Jews? Sephardic Jews are the Jews of Spain, Portugal, North America, and the Middle East, and their descendants. The adjective Sephardic and corresponding nouns, Sephardi, singular, and Sephardim, plural, are derived from the Hebrew, the American word Sephardard, or Sephard, which refers to Spain, Moors. Mizrahic, descendants of Jews from North Africa, the Middle East. Other subgroups are Yemenite, Ethiopian, and Oriental family. We almost done, Empress. The original of the Ashkenazi Jews, who came most recently from Europe, has largely been shrouded in mystery. But a new study suggests that at least their maternal lineage may derive largely from Europe. Though the finding may seem intuitive, Moors, it contradicts the notion that European Jews mostly descend from people who left Israel and the Middle East around 2,000 years ago. Instead, a substantial proportion of the population originates from local Europeans who converted to Judaism. And you can research a study by Martin Richards, just their opinion, an archaeologist at the University of Huddersfield, England. Surprise, Ashkenazi Jews are genetically European by Tia Goals, the staff writer. You can research it. This is their pen. Various East and West African ethnic nations lay verifiable claim to their Jewish ancestral heritage. The fallacious, but most famous of those black Jews have been validated. Close to 300,000 of those black fallacious Jews live in the modern state of Israel as practicing Jews. I showed you that. I just demonstrated that not too long ago, didn't we? With the slave, Quada Equana. When we connect the story of Gad, and you connect those Gad to the Igbo people, you know, we just demonstrated that. When I say the research is done, man, I'm not arguing no religious dogma. When we deal with carbon dating, and if the pen doesn't match the carbon, you don't change the carbon, you change the pen. The Limbas of South Africa, another so-called Bantu tribe, have a cognate and valid claim to Jewish ancestry and heritage, backed by solid genetic evidence. But don't y'all know more the President Lumumba? Man, I can show y'all so much stuff how Belgium killed the president. And the Europeans just didn't do it. Your own brothers was down with it. How? Because a brother would take some money to sell you out. I'm telling you, research the history of how they killed President Lumumba. Research it. The Limbas, as a group, are indistinguished from their Bantu neighbors, suggesting that most Bantu groups possess the archetype, the Jewish genetic, the haplogroup. It implies that there are potentially more bloodline Jews on the continent of Africa than anywhere else, including modern Europe and Israel. Moors, the names of old Jewish communities south of the Atlantis Mountains, around the regions of modern Niger, Nigeria, many of which exist well into the Renaissance times, can be found in documents in synagogue archives in Cairo. Everything can be found in Cairo, Moors. I'm telling you. The Moorish gates, historians have explained that the Arabs brought Islam to Maghreb as they moved into the area of Moors. The Arabs were a powerful political and military force in the region. More research the Arab slave trade. They were enslaving the Moors, the Africans, for way before some transatlantic slave trade. And at first there were pressure for Berbers, Aboriginal Moors, to join the Arab military and adopt Islam for reasons of political and economic advantage. However, Moors, by the 8th century, Berbers were ready to adopt Islam as well as Arabic culture. They converted to Islam on a massive scale, but also continued to resent the Arab domination. You know what I mean? The second place, and we almost done, I'll leave you with this, Moors. The second place is located in Jerusalem itself, known as Kantara, Asbat, al-Badak, at Baal al-Shalasha, including a large building. It's called Ewan, E-W-A-N, a large house, a yard, a facility, and an underground store, and a cellar. The document at the end warned that Allah will punish those who would alter or deny the dedication of the property because a good believer would not violate the legacy. The document was signed on the 29th of Ramadan, 728, 1320 CE. For more information, one should research a document by Abu Madein Al-Ghouth, which outlined the various territories. And it reads, the lands were dedicated to the Moors in Jerusalem, or those visiting the city, regardless of color, trade, sex, age, or status, and that no one could fight the Moors against the Waqf, an Islamic endowment of land and or property. Status itself is of paramount importance in the contemplation of the Waqf, since it is so that many Moors have been stripped of their birthright with vile institutions such as slavery and modern caste slavery, under terms such as Negro, black, and colored. Nevertheless, Moors, it appears in the language of the Waqf or the Waqf that these imposed statuses are not exclusionary in regards to the application of the Waqf. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But according to the Palestinian Information Center, Moors, all these estates have been known to everyone, and the ruling states have been faithful and considerate regarding these states, especially the Ottoman, through the British occupation until Jews captured it in 1948. Moors, when I show you the picture, Wentworth Matthews in Harlem, the Jewish Moorish Zionist temple, and you see in the back the American Commerce flag, and you see that 6-point star flag. When I say the 5-point star and the 6-point star is the Moors, this was before Israel was created a state. Come on, man. Then in 1967, the war annexed the rest of Israel and bulldozed the Moorish inside the city walls. The Israeli forces bulldozed the Moorish quarters inside the city walls for 4 days after the war in 1967, leaving 135 families, totaling 65 people homeless, 650 people homeless, Moors. So we see there is much to be learned about the connection between Moors and the so-called blacks in international affairs, especially in affairs regarding the Holy Land and the Middle East conflict Moors. So we have to understand who we are in history and what they didn't teach us in history class, and do things on a scholarly base, Moors. I love you all, Moors. Love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, health, and wealth. Peace.